Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. Today I'm going to try to very concisely have a conversation about terminology, and I want to talk about the nuanced difference between the terms African American, Black, person of color, Black Indigenous person of color, which is BIPOC, BAME, which is an English term. I'm going to try to very concisely explain what I believe to be the nuanced difference between them and how you can use them appropriately in context. So I have these little diagram. So in general, in the US at least, people societally can be divided from everyone into white people and non-white people. Non-white people are people of color. And this is not to segregate or divide people or say, it's none of that. I'm just saying that societally it's the most easy to differentiate the way that we experience life and the societal expectations placed upon us and the things we have to deal with, white people and POC. Some people, myself included, don't think that POC has enough nuance between our lived experiences. In the US, for example, I think at least that Black and Indigenous people have an extremely unique set of circumstances and prejudices and racism, and we deal with certain shit that's different from other people of color like Latinas and Asians and everyone else. So it can be argued if you really want to be specific with people, you should just call them what they are. If you're talking about Asian people, you should just say Asian. If you're talking about Black people, you should say Black. But in general, I like to see a little bit more nuance where everyone is divided into white, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, which is where the term BIPOC comes from. So instead of using POC, I prefer to use BIPOC. I don't even know if that's how you say it. Maybe people say BIPOC, and it's not talking about bisexual people of color, it's just BIPOC. I like to use that term when just referencing people of color because it gives a little sprinkle of nuance to Black and Indigenous people, because Indigenous people have had their land stolen, their lives erased, and oh my God, everything's stolen from them for 400 years. And Black people have been, had our culture ripped away from us, made into enslaved people, and been repressed and had racism against us for 400 years. We have deep, different roots of how we're treated differently from just generic people of color. And not all people of color are allies, period. But that's where we get this nuance. Now, going into Black, should you call someone Black? Should you call someone African American? I just want to firstly say Black is not a negative term, and there seems to be a negative connotation. Do I call him Black? Yeah. And if you call someone Black, I hope that no one gets offended, because if you're Black, you're Black. If you called me Black, I'd be like, and what else is the conversation? But the nuance comes into African American, and I just put XYZ because there's a lot more ways that Black people can classify themselves more nuanced culturally, but I'm talking about African Americans right now. So African Americans can, number one, be people who are ancestors of enslaved people who were brought here against their will, and they don't have recorded cultural ties to their home countries. They really maybe can't claim to be Nigerian American anymore because they don't know if they're 100% from Nigeria. They don't know where their cultural roots, ethnic roots really tie back to. So culturally, we claim African Americans. We've been here 400 years. That's what we got. On the other hand, there are people like me. My dad is 100% Jamaican, born and raised. He's the first generation to come to the United States. He could claim to be 100% West Indian and not African American. But I claim to be African American because I don't have cultural ties to Jamaica. I was born here. My dad chopped all cultural ties to Jamaica to try to make it in this world, joined the military when he was 17. So I didn't grow up with the cultural, they're doing construction, the cultural history, and I feel I have a hard time claiming Jamaican because I don't understand it 100%. So I claim African American. So those are the two ways people can identify with African Americanness. I think that's pretty good. Okay, last one is BAME. I had to look this up because I was like, what? What? It sounds like a superhero, like the Avengers. I was like, BAME, what is that? So apparently in the UK, or maybe just in Europe, But what I've seen in the UK, people use BAME instead of BIPOC, just because they have different ethnic populations, sizes, differences. So that's just how they divide it, okay? So this should say ME. Okay, now it's BAME. They divide everyone to white people, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, which just means POC. BAME, Black, Asian, minority ethnic. It's basically the same thing as BIPOC, but they don't have indigenous people, they're indigenous people. Oh, I won't get into that, but that's where those terms come from. I really think that words matter and that there's intention behind words. And if I see people making posts and writing articles and calling people Black with like a lowercase b, I'm like, I see that. Or if I see people referencing an African narrative and talking about racism in Africa and they call them African Americans, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So please just try to read up on these on your own time, research these terms: Black, POC, African American, BAME. Look them up on your own time and just try to understand the nuance between them. There are differences. If you called me BAME, I don't know if I would be offended or not, because I'd be like, I guess, yeah, what's the nuance behind that? So just understand what you're saying before you say it is my advice. And asking these questions are good. Not everyone has to answer all your questions, because a lot of Black people are exhausted and are tired of explaining ourselves. So the internet is a great resource to start with, and then very kind, look at this conditioner, very kind people will make videos like this trying to help you understand further. So I hope this helped. Let me know if this helped.